Hello and welcome to Food Ingredients Europe. I'm here at ADM stand and I'm joined by Divya Mohan. Divya, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Could you tell me a little bit about your role at ADM and what you're focusing on at the moment?
Of course, I am the Director for Creation, Design and Development at ADM, globally responsible for our health and wellness solutions focused on food and beverage. Essentially what I do is how, why and when do we add functional ingredients into food and beverage matrices is essentially where I come in. And what we're focusing at ADM today is about bringing functionality to everyday food and beverage, especially considering pill fatigue that you see with consumers. So we're looking at how do we get all of these exciting ingredients that have such good clinical documentation behind it into foods that consumers enjoy in their everyday life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And one of the main things you're focusing on is, this trend of weight loss medication.
Right.
And I'd really like to know a little bit more about what ADM is doing here and really what the main challenges are there.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have recognized that anti-obesity medications have really taken over the market, and we expect that trend to really go only upwards. Essentially, with this whole GLP-1 analog drugs coming into play, they have been a breakthrough of just understanding of how these drugs are now resulting in weight loss, somewhere along the lines of 15 to 20% of weight loss, in mean weight loss, let's say. And that is something that the industry and consumers are just not used to. Typically, when you have interventions of diet or exercise, we see a weight loss somewhere along the lines of 5 to 10% with extreme interventions. But in this case, with the drug, we're seeing 15 to 20%. So we're looking at weight loss completely differently with anti-obesity medications. Given that this is the case, we have started identifying what exactly are the nutritional gaps for consumers of anti-obesity medications. And we have identified two main consumer moments. The first one being around while they are consuming those drugs. So while they're consuming the drugs, because a big part of food noise, essentially when we're already thinking about lunch right now, or when we're eating lunch, we're thinking about dinner. So when we have that food noise dampened down by these drugs, a lot of us feel constant satiety, and that means a lot of the consumption or the amount of calories we produce. Because of eating less food, what is happening is with weight loss, you're getting muscle loss, somewhere along the lines of 20 to 40% of the weight loss that consumers experience might be muscle. So when you have muscle loss, how exactly do you retain those muscles? That's a big area of nutrition gap that we're concerned about. The second area is, of course, one of the things we have seen with clinical studies that consumers who are taking these drugs, they're also seeing a high level of gastrointestinal discomfort, nausea, for example, because food is just traveling slower through the gut. And this is another space that we're identifying as a need space, and how do we solve that, right? And the third and really important space is hydration. As people are eating less food, 20 to 40% of the water or fluids we get is through our everyday food. But with lower food volume, we're also getting less fluids. Perhaps another area of hydration from an indirect perspective is also, we usually have a specific beverage we reach out to, but what we've identified is there's also a difference of perception in sensory or sweetness, for example. So typically when they're looking out for beverages, the typical beverage they're reaching out for may be different now. They may not want to reach out for that soda or the sweet beverage or fruit juice. So how do we look at hydration and ensure that this population who's eating less food and experiencing not just food satiety, but thirst satiety, how do we address hydration for them? In the second moment, which is really 6 months after the use of the drug, right after the use of the drug, it's a very critical moment because all that food noise that was dampened is back again. They're starting to think about food again, they're starting to think about what they have to eat. So now the entire mindset is a lot more about how do you manage weight and how do you induce satiety back to these consumers. So in this case, a big focus for us is building ingredients that help with satiety, because that's something they need to bring back to manage their weight. And how do you help with weight management in general? The psychology and the biology of weight loss and weight management is completely different. And so at ADM, we're trying to understand what it means to maintain weight and what ingredients and formats and solutions we can provide to help with weight maintenance. And that essentially is a big focus area for us when we think about nutrient density.
There's quite a lot to think about when you're researching and developing in this space. And something you said about how it's one thing to be helping people when they're taking the medication, but also once they stop taking the medication and how things are going to change for them, in terms of sensory appeal and, as you mentioned, this food noise.
Yeah.
And so collectively there is a lot to think about. How is ADM supporting consumers on their weight management journey?
That's a great question. So as we've identified this nutrition gap areas and consumer needs, what we've also tried to identify is what are the solutions we have to address those needs. For example, when we think about muscle loss retention, we have plant-based protein solutions, and specifically what's unique in our plant-based protein solutions is we have soy, pea and wheat protein, and within these proteins there are highly clean tasting proteins. Getting plant-based protein to taste clean, have good gelling capabilities, good water holding capabilities, so that you can easily blend and make different formats of food is key here. So we've designed our protein solutions to be deliverable in different formats. You can make a protein beverage, you can make a plant-based alternative meat solution, or a bar with our protein solution. So the variety and the kind of flexibility our protein solution has that plays into delivering high protein with great taste in the same box, which fits into that muscle mass retention category. I think the second area is gastrointestinal disorder or the discomfort that consumers face. Within that, we have excellent solutions for pre, pro, and postbiotics, the complete microbiome solution. All of this targeting gut health. So we have Fibersol within our prebiotic solution. It is an extremely well-tolerated fiber based on corn. We also have probiotic solutions, probiotics that actually are able to sustain and be extremely functional and have good recovery through harsh processing conditions, like our Bacillus subtilis DE111. It's a spore-forming bacteria. And most exciting for me is the postbiotics. And I think ADM is leading the way when it comes to postbiotics, because we are doing high level of clinical research in bringing the science behind the ingredient. Postbiotics are not alive anymore. They are heat treated in nature. These heat treated cells, even after being heat treated, have a benefit to the end consumer. So what is exciting about postbiotics is now you don't have the concern of cross contamination, and you can bring this into beverages, for example, long shelf life beverages, UHT treated beverages with ease, and you can give the benefit of gut health in this. So within this we have several different types of postbiotics. Primarily, one of the ones that we think is beneficial for these users is our Bifidobacterium longum strain called ES1 postbiotic. The science and the clinical study we have behind this is definitely game-changing, because our clinical studies compares the placebo, the live version and the postbiotic version, and we see that the postbiotic performs just as the probiotic does in the end results that we have. So an extremely efficient postbiotic solution for gastrointestinal health. In terms of hydration, how ADM is looking at it is how do you make that consumption experience more appealing for the end consumer, right? How do you make them reach out to a beverage? So we have a lot of functional beverage solutions, so they're getting a functionality, plus they're getting a good tasting beverage out of it. Since sweetness perception is so altered for users of these drugs, we also have a lot of flavor tools to help with addressing the sweetness solutions and their need for sensory aspects within this. When it comes to weight management, ADM has put a lot of effort into understanding the psychology between the weight loss and weight management here. We are definitely working with high protein, high fiber solutions, working a lot with whole meal solutions, which can include high protein and high fiber. For example, frozen meal solutions, high protein beverages. The key here is when you work with proteins, getting the protein to taste good while also deliver functionality is definitely a challenge. We have the resources to really bring a lot of our flavor, our colors, our texturizing solution to the functionality, so we can deliver that to the end consumer. So we still need to maintain what we call nutrient-dense solutions, which means every calorie matters. Every calorie is bringing functionality with it. So within, for people who have stopped using the drugs, we're highly focused on calorie-dense, nutrient-dense solutions from our portfolio.
Great, thank you. And you've mentioned a little bit about functional beverages and frozen meals and the inclusion of proteins and postbiotics. What other areas of product development opportunities do you see for ADM?
One of the things we are learning more, and we're doing a lot of internal market research as well with people who are consuming these drugs. We're keeping very up to date with the research in this space, where we're trying to understand what is the sensory changes and preference changes for these consumers. And as we learn more, we're also trying to identify what are those flavors, textures that are more preferable for these consumers. So we have a range of different solutions. In fact, a big space that is untapped is perhaps the savory space. Savory space being functional, like functional broths, functional soups. That's an area that we have really tried to develop a lot more prototypes, a lot more end solutions. So these consumers might prefer those type of full meal solutions that are guided towards them. In fact, in one of our research, our marketing research, we found that in the US, for example, 81% of the people taking anti-obesity medication drugs prefers if the brand specifically markets the products for them. Not just an everyday brand, but have a brand or a product specifically targeted for them. How do we make solutions that are completely holistic in nature, that is not just thinking about high protein, high fiber, but how do you bring in the lacking vitamins, perhaps the micronutrients within it? So we're really looking at this from a very holistic perspective. How do we make complete solutions with a range of our ingredients?
Thank you very much, Divya.
Thank you so much.